So this is going to be a video about growth phases. Specifically, I'm going to talk about my growth phase in my off season, and then I'm going to just answer general questions about growth phases and struggles people wanted me to touch on, things like that. So I competed last. I am a bikini competitor. My last show was in 2020, and my feedback of that season was that my upper body needed to grow to match my lower body, which was the same feedback that I got in 2017. So one thing I'm going to talk about later in the video is like the difference between the two off seasons, because that first off season was definitely not my most productive, and I want to share my mistakes with you so that you don't make the same ones. Sorry, Henry's little pitter patter is as he walks across the floor. I'm going to start with one of the questions because it makes sense to kind of define a growth phase before I even talk more about mine. So someone asked, what is a growth phase? And a growth phase is going to be when we're specifically focused on growing muscle as the goal. We're not trying to lose body fat. We're not focused so much on like a health goal or anything like that. Like the main goal is to build muscle. Now that's not to say that we can't build muscle in other phases. Like when you're in a health phase, you can build muscle still. But a growth phase, like I said, is like, that is the goal we're focused on. And in a growth phase, you're gonna be in more of a surplus. Now, the way I approach a growth phase and the way like the coach I currently work with approaches a growth phase is like, we're not doing a dirty bulk or being like excessive with our food intake. We're eating the amount we need to grow, nothing beyond that. So we're not getting sloppy. We're not just like eating whatever we want, nothing like that. So we are going to be eating more though, and for women specifically, this is something that you have to be okay with if your goal is to build muscle. So the other question was like, why do you need to do a growth phase, and how do you know when you need to do one or not? So if your goal is to build muscle, then chances are you're going to want to do a growth phase at some point. Now, when you are a newbie in the gym, you are at an advantage because you can kind of recomp, which is body recomposition. You can build muscle and lose body fat at the same time. But the higher your training age, like the longer you've been at this, the harder it gets to do both at the same time. So you might not need a growth phase right now if you're brand spanking new to the gym and everything like that. But if you've been at it for a long time and you have put on a significant amount of muscle or lost a significant amount of body fat, I would focus more on specific phases to one goal or the other. And then something I want to touch on is that a lot of women come to me with the goal of like looking toned or defined, and we're still using those words, but what you mean is muscular. Even if you see someone who looks lean and toned and defined, like that person has muscle. If you don't have muscle and you lose body fat, you're just gonna look skinny or skinny fat, or you're not gonna see any definition because there's no muscle there to show. So if you are continuously saying that you want to look toned and defined, but you're scared to lift weights and scared to build muscle, you're kind of working against yourself there. So just putting that out there, because I think a lot of women are scared to do a growth phase or scared to lift heavier weights, but they say that their goal is to look more toned and defined, which is, it requires you to do those things. So I talked about how training age matters. If you're not a newbie and you do want to build muscle, you do want to look more toned and defined, chances are you might want to consider going into a growth phase. And if you're working with a coach, obviously they'll help guide you there. Now for me, what I need to do a growth phase, well, I talked about how my goal or my feedback in bikini was that my shoulders needed to grow more, and then I still need to develop my glutes more. That wasn't like my main feedback, but you can always do more glutes. I shouldn't say always, maybe there will come a day when they're like, your glutes are perfect as they are. But those are like the main areas in the bikini division that you focus on. So I need to grow my shoulders. So I need to be in multiple growth phases. My timeline after my 2020 show, I did switch coaches at the beginning of 2021 after my reverse diet. I could do a whole nother video on reverse dieting, but I hired my previous coach, Mark, in January of, or February or March actually of 2021, and we worked together. We did a little bit of a growth phase. Then we actually did a gut health phase. I had a little bit going on as far as gut health goes, nothing crazy, but I went through gut health phase and cleaned up things there. And then I did a growth phase again. Then I did a health phase, and that was more specifically on hormone health based on some of the labs that I had. And then I also got off birth control. So from January of last year to January of this year, I really just focused on getting my hormones back to a better spot and getting my adrenal health in a better spot, because my stress was very high and I had to work on a lot of things for that. Again, that could be a topic for another video. That's like a whole in-depth thing, but we did those things, and then my health is in a really good spot. I did switch to another coach on the same team. So Coach Kevin is my coach now on Dominic Trained, and I'm really happy with him. That choice to switch was more of a personality thing and just like different needs that I had from now versus 3 years ago, you know. Mark really helped me with the health things that I needed to work through. Now that those things are in a really good spot, like my main focus is me as an athlete and a competitor, and Kevin is really great in the area that I need as far as like the mindset and as far as like corrective exercise, because I did come across, I experienced some injuries along the way the last few years, and he's really great about working around those things. So that's why, part of the reason why I switched. So Kevin and I have been working together since January. We've been doing a growth phase most of that time. And now it is June, and my next check-in with him is tomorrow, but tomorrow I should be ending the growth phase and going into a health phase, which is going to be like the beginning part of prep for us. So kind of a longer prep, but the beginning part being a health phase, and then like later on going into more of an aggressive push. So that's what we've talked about. So that's where I'm at in my journey right now. But just based on what I just said, I've done 3 growth phases in the last 3+ years in my off season. So like 3.5 years. In between those, there was no dieting phase, no mini cuts, nothing like that. I did do a gut health phase and a health phase, but nothing, and of course the reverse diet out of my contest prep, but none of those things were dieting. So I have not dieted since 2020. I think it's just really important for people to hear that, is like, if your goal is to get healthy, if your goal is to grow, like stop trying to pause and diet for a little bit. Like, it's okay to be uncomfortable. You're gonna get healthier faster. You're gonna grow muscle faster if you just like cut the bullshit and just let yourself stay out of a diet, because you're just like taking away time from the goal to build muscle, or taking away time from the goal to get healthy. And for me, I know like if I'm not healthy, I can't prep. So my ultimate goal is to get back on stage and be the best competitor, to win. And if I'm just like bullshitting around and not letting myself get healthy, or like, oh, I'm uncomfortable, I want to cut, then I'm just kicking myself in the butt and adding more time to my timeline. So that's that. Someone asked what a growth phase looks like and how to know whether to continue to the growth phase, transition to a maintenance phase, or go into a cut. So I know myself as a coach, and I know my own coach works in a similar way. Is like, we don't do like huge surpluses. We're not like excessive. We just give you the food that you need, right? So it's going to depend on like where your maintenance is at and everything, but like we don't want to be excessive. So you're going to be in a slight surplus. And with that, we are always tracking biofeedback. So your digestion, your sleep, your stress, your blood glucose. And then of course, like visually, we're looking at measurements and your photos of like, where's body fat at. So I'm not trying to make someone get fat while they're in a growth phase, you know, like gain excessive amount of body fat. Yes, you do have to gain some body fat, that comes along with it, but it shouldn't be excessive. So I'm looking at those things, and if I see someone accumulating too much body fat, or I see that their digestion is starting to take a hit, or their blood glucose is starting to get higher, or their labs are off, or anything like that, even like trouble sleeping or whatever, I see those things start to get skewed, then I'm going to pull them back to maintenance and give them a break from pushing food so hard. I'm not going to put them into a diet. I'm just bringing their food back down to what their maintenance is, where we're not pushing, if that makes sense. And then wait for that stuff to level out, spend a good 12, 16 weeks maybe just back at maintenance, and then we kind of assess from there. We might go back into another growth phase, which was the next question, is like how often to do a growth phase, or we might go into a cut. This is where it depends. So like, it's like, what's the ultimate goal? Again, if you really need to put on muscle to look the way you want to look, or to achieve what you want to achieve, is going into a cut just like adding more time to your timeline? Probably, you know? So if we're at maintenance, things are good, and we say like, hey, we still haven't put on the amount of muscle we wanted to put on, we're going to do another growth phase. How often to do them? If you're a natural athlete, it's not going to hurt you to do multiple growth phases. A deficit's a different story. Like you can only diet so much. So we want to save those for like when we need to do them, or for when it makes sense to do them. But a growth phase, we're just adding a little bit more food, training a little bit harder. So it's not going to be like detrimental to do multiple growth phases. Like I said, I've done 3 over the last few years. Just pay attention to biofeedback. So we don't want to just like extend it if digestion is starting to suck and biofeedback is starting to take a hit, and maybe mentally you need a break from pushing so hard. It does get uncomfortable. So just kind of pay attention to all those things. Now with the discomfort, I'll get back into like the mental side of things later, but there's a part where like as a coach, I need to recognize when someone is like really burnt out on being in a growth phase, or if they just need a little tough love of like, yeah, this is going to be uncomfortable. We just kind of need to push through it, because there are going to be uncomfortable days and times and things like that. And we do need to accept the discomfort a little bit to get to where we want to get. I did just want to note that if you are a PED user, so performance enhancing drugs, then you are going to have to take breaks from that for periods of time. So you can't just do those all the time either. You need to pull back from them, do more of like a health phase or something like that, where you're just going back to baseline. If you're on TRT or HRT or anything, you might be on those things like at a baseline level. But if you're, you know, using other steroids or anything like that, of course, you're going to want to pull back from that. So you can't be like pushing those in a growth phase forever either. So there's that there. You're going to need to have phases where you pull back from that if you are doing those things. Someone asked, how does one determine if it's time to enter a mini cut after a growth phase? I'm not a big I'm not a big fan of mini cuts. There is a time and place, but like I very rarely use them. So like, what would be the reason for a mini cut? The reason most people ask to do a mini cut is like, oh, I'm starting to get fluffy, uncomfortable. Coach, can I do a mini cut? And then we can get back to growing. And this goes back to like, hey, are we just like adding more time to your timeline? Could you just be a little bit more uncomfortable for another 8 weeks to 12 weeks and push through, so that we can just like go do a real cut when we get to the goal of like growing enough muscle, because we're just like pulling away from your ability to grow muscle if we're like throwing in cuts. But with that being said, there are instances where I might do one. One would be like, again, if like digestion and biofeedback is off, and I think that the person could actually benefit physiologically from like doing a slight deficit, I might do that just to get a little body fat off, get everything in a better position there. Or if I do think mentally they really need a break from the pushing, and if health and everything, labs are all in a good place, like they're physically okay to do a dieting phase for a short period of time, I might do that to just like give them that mental break, so that they can push again. So there are times where I'm like, okay, we could benefit from doing that, but I think people are way too quick to just be like, oh, I'm uncomfortable, let's do a mini cut. Like if I had done that, or like, I know my coach would have said no, but if I had done that, that would have just extended how much time I'm taking away from the stage in my case. Next question was, how have your workouts and training splits changed in this phase? And then someone else asked, does programming change or look different in a growth phase? So exercise selection doesn't really change a lot. And this is something I think, again, people need to hear is you don't need to like change up the workouts or exercises you're doing often. Mine don't change very often, like my own from my coach. The reasons you would change it are based on physique changes. So like specifically for someone who's a competitor, like you're trying to build a very specific physique, like is it building the way you want it to? And do you need to fine tune and finesse it so that we're getting all the little parts that we need to get? Like for example, the glutes, like do you need to grow more glute med and like specifically choose exercises to build what you need to build for your physique. For a lifestyle athlete, they might still have very specific physique goals there, or they just might want like a well-balanced physique. So it's like, how is your physique responding to the training program? Do we need to change it in that way? Another thing is like training videos. So my coach watches my training videos. I watch my clients' training videos, and I'll speak on how I approach it as a coach myself is if I am watching someone's training video and I'm like, that exercise isn't for them. Like there's a better option or there's a better variation. I might change it based on those. So that's one reason training videos are really important is like once I see you do the exercise, I might be like, yeah, that's not the one I want you to do. And then based on that person's biomechanics and how they move. Could be like based on their femur length or different things or just how they move. And so it might be based on that. As far as like people getting bored, there's two sides to this. Like the main thing is like you don't want to just like switch your workouts up so often that you're not even able to progress on the exercises themselves. So like with training videos and everything, we're looking at form, we're looking at tempo, we're looking at the execution, and are you using the right weight? Are you pushing yourself hard enough? So like if I'm having someone send me a few training videos every week and I'm sending them feedback to improve on those things, like it can take us weeks and months to work through that one training program, making sure every exercise is correct. And once it's correct, then you're trying to progress on it further and further. So like increasing the weight, increasing the reps, making sure to stay on top of tempo, better form, all those things, better engagement. So if I just like, you finally got everything right, and then I'm like, all right, great, now let's change it. It's like, that didn't allow us to make the most out of that programming because you're finally learning to do things right, and now you can progress on it. So it's getting everything done correctly and then progressing on it from there. And then once progression stalls, then we will be like, okay, now it's time to switch this up. And when I say switch things up, it's not like necessarily just throwing out the whole program out the window. It might just be like, all right, like we're stalling on dumbbell lateral raises, let's swap it out for a cable variation. Or, you know, swapping a dumbbell overhead press for like a machine press. Like, so the exercise equipment we might change like the sets, the reps, we might add intensifiers, things like that. So there's like little swaps we can make and things like that. But as far as like the getting bored part, I would say like, if you feel like you struggle with that, I would focus more on the progression piece of listening to your feedback from the training videos that you send, and then the logbook, like actually just making it your goal every week to do better than you did the last week. So every time I go in the gym, I take my logbook and I have like a written book and I look back at the previous week and I'm like, okay, I did these numbers last week. My form was really good because I'll write notes about that. And then I'm like, all right, so my goal today is to do another 2 reps, or my goal today is to add 5 pounds to that. Or I'll have a note that was like, my tempo sucked. So then I'm like, okay, my goal is not to add more reps or weight. My goal is to have better tempo this week. So like, I'm focused on that. I'm not like focused on, I want to change this exercise up. Now, there are circumstances where I'll like see that someone is mentally just like checked out a little bit and they've been on the same training block for a while. I might be like, okay, now it's time, just for like the sake of keeping them in the game, I might change it up, or at least change some things up for that reason. But it's like I learn the athlete before doing that. You know, I'm not just doing it just to appease their boredom type of thing. It's like I'm doing it because I feel like they really could mentally benefit from it at that point, and like they've spent enough time on that specific program. So hopefully that answers that question. And then like, again, for me, my physique is going to be more specific with what my coach changes. It's like he's looking at my posing, he's looking at my physique for the bikini criteria, and he's like, okay, like what do we need to change for you to match that? Or Kevin is actually really good at just like, you know, after I had so many health phases and like just a really long off season, I had a period of time where I wasn't really feeling like an athlete anymore. So one of my training splits, he just like literally just murdered me in the gym. Like the workouts were really long, really intense, but like it made me really happy to be in the gym again, and it made me excited about it again. So like that was some of the reasoning behind the way he did my programming. And then like once I was back at it, felt really good mentally again. Like we switched things up a little bit. So there can be a lot of reasons for changes there. But as far as like how workout and training splits change during different phases, a lot of times it will be like more the volume or the rate of intensity. So volume would be like number of reps and sets, and then like the weight that you're using. So as you get like into more of a dieting phase, at some point you might need to pull back a little bit, or if you're in a health phase and you need to work on hormone health or get stressed down, we might not push as hard in the gym. So intensity might be pulled back a little bit, but it's more of those things that might change and get adjusted a little bit. So like, for example, when I was in a health phase, I trained at 3 RIR for a while, which is 3 reps in a reserve. So I usually train to failure, which is like leaving nothing in the tank, right? 3 RIR is like you could have done 3 more reps, but you stopped ahead there. So sometimes you need to pull back a little bit, and I did have to do that during my health phases. Right now I'm training to failure, pushing as hard as I can there. Someone asked, would you say that 3 leg days would be required? So this is really going to be dependent on the goal and if the person can recover from it. I generally coach lifestyle athletes, and I can't think of anyone that I have do 3 leg days unless they're on a full body split where they do like 3 full body days a week, and there are some leg exercises in each one. I'll usually split it. So like on day 1, they're doing more like quad focused, and then on day 2, it's more hamstring, and like day 3, it's more like glute dominant leg exercises, whatever. With that being said, like someone who's a wellness competitor, like they need big legs. So they might train legs 3 days a week, and their coach probably caters it so that they can recover from that. It could also be like a training split doesn't have to be 7 days. So maybe there's more leg days, but it's spread out over like a 10-day split or something like that. For example, my split's a 6-day split. So I do 2 days on, 1 day off, 2 days on, 1 day off, and then I start the cycle over again. And I have 1 leg day and 1 glute and delt day as far as lower body goes. But like, if you're not a wellness competitor or like a division of bodybuilding that requires like really big legs, I wouldn't say it would be required. Like you can build some really nice legs with just two leg days in there. And honestly, in general, like my training splits for my athletes are usually 4 days, sometimes 3, sometimes 5, no more than that. So it'd be pretty hard to get like that many full leg days in there, making sure we're still hitting all the other muscle groups. And then the last 2 pieces here are mindset during growth phase, and then kind of like the mind fuck of accumulating body fat and watching your cuts and the lines kind of disappear. So with the mindset, I did want to really mention like keeping a coach during a growth phase is super important. And this is, again, what I'm sharing from my own experience as well, is like my first off season, I did some of a reverse with my first coach, and then I was moving and a lot of stuff, and I was like, I got this, I'll do this on my own. And then I kind of took over my own programming. And there was a lot of things that like came into play after this that like play a part here, but I did take time away from having a coach. I took away time from like the goal of competing. I wasn't sure if I was going to compete again. I also moved a couple times. It started like a new full-time job back then, and I started a new relationship back then. So there was like a lot of things, like competing just wasn't my main focus, but I definitely let some things slip. And I think even having a coach, even if I was just doing lifestyle, probably would have been a good idea back then. But things did get like a little bit sloppy, I would say. Like I still went to the gym, I still made like healthy food choices, but I wasn't really following macros or anything like that. And I definitely accumulated more body fat in my off season than I would have liked to, and that was ideal for me. And my weight at the end of my last off season compared to my weight at the end of this off season is the same, but I look completely different. And I'll see if I can throw some photos up here so you can see the comparison there. But like this photo comparison basically shows you like your approach to a growth phase or an off season, and how like lenient you are with yourself about it, and whether you choose to have guidance or not can like make or break how your physique looks, even if it's like the same weight. So, you know, like I said, I was like in a new relationship then and everything like that. It was a lot of like eating out, would have more drinks and stuff like that then. And I kind of just like pulled back from tracking my food as much. And I don't regret that, even though it wasn't like the best as towards my competitive goals. I think for my relationship with food, that actually was really good for me to take a step back from tracking, because I've been tracking my food off and on since 2011 maybe. So like 13 years. So that's a lot of time to just be like always tracking everything that you're eating. So I'm not mad that I took that time off. I think I needed it, and my relationship with food is way better now. Combination of, I think, allowing myself that time to just like have some freedom there, along with actually learning like the foods that are good for my body and stuff like that. But I think having a coach is huge. So I think people think they only need a coach in a dieting phase, because that's when you're really like pushing yourself, everything like that. And they tend to think like, oh, I'm eating more food, like I'll still grow muscle. It's not as, I don't need that accountability. And I just really disagree, especially based off my own experience and seeing other people. Like I have like, you know, previous clients and stuff that would do that. They're like, oh, I can handle this, I'm going to go off on my own. And they would come back in like not the best spot because of that. Now, I don't think that's like always the case. My goal now, and like how I've always improved my coaching from then, is like, how can I put them in the best spot to be able to do that on their own? But sometimes people like kind of jump the gun on like leaving before they have that guidance. So I think it is important of like, if you do want to do it on your own, make sure you ask your coach the questions of like how do I handle food? How many meals should I do like not tracked? Or if I'm not going to track, like how can I make sure that I'm not like going too crazy, anything like that. In relationship with food, I think has to be in a really good spot to be able to do that on your own too, so that you don't just like go crazy with it. And then with the mental mind fuck of accumulating body fat and watching your cuts kind of disappear. One, know that it is necessary to gain some body fat, especially if we're talking about the extremes of competing. Like you are getting like as lean as a human can get, basically, and then you are coming out of that on purpose, right? And you can't stay at that level. That's not healthy. And having some body fat is normal and is healthy. Now, I think it's important to make sure that you're not getting sloppy and that you're not gaining excessive body fat, because a lot of people do that. They kind of rebound and gain too much body fat. Again, I kind of was in that position my first off season. If you do things the right way, it won't be excessive. So you can, like, you do have to, again, gain body fat back just to be at a healthy spot, but you don't have to be excessive about it. So like just eating whatever you want, doing a dirty bulk, like I wouldn't do that. Be okay with sizing up. So I, in a prep, will be like an extra small, and I can still fit into a small if I want to, but I, last year, I think, sized up to a medium finally, and like sized up in like some of my like jean shorts and stuff like that. And that was huge, because I think I like had to just accept that I am going to be a bigger size. But one thing is, like, a bigger size doesn't mean it's all body fat, you know. I did gain muscle, which was the goal. So like I should take up more space and I should be a bigger size. So if I want my glutes to grow, if I want more muscular legs, like they're gonna fill out more clothing, you know? So just remember, like, if my goal is to get big, like muscular, and I really don't want to say that because it's so hard to get big, you know, like medium is not a big, like if you saw me on the street, you might not even know that I lift, you know? So I don't want anyone scared of like getting big because you're doing a growth phase. Like truly, I have done so many growth phases now and I'm still like not as muscular as I want to be. And again, like you wouldn't see me on the street or at the pool and be like, that girl's too big, you know? So, going back to that, just be okay with sizing up. So like I wear medium now in most of my clothes. I know when I prep again, I'll be a smaller size, but like if you're fitting into a smaller size just to say that you're a smaller size, you're going to be uncomfortable because it's going to be like more restrictive. Even if you can fit into it, it's not going to feel great. You're going to feel it's really tight on your waist, or like your sports bras are going to be really tight around your rib cage. Like it doesn't have to be that way, and it's a lot more comfortable. Your lifts are going to be more comfortable. Your life is going to be more comfortable if you just pick the size that actually fits you well, and you're going to look better and you're going to feel more confident. So if you're like squishing yourself into that smaller size, you're not going to look your best. And then the other thing is like not mirror checking as often. So I know when you're in a cut, it's easy to like get used to like constantly like just taking a look in the mirror, seeing like, oh, I see new lines today. I see a new ab line or whatever. And I think I like to discourage that in general, but I know when you're in a dieting phase that that's going to happen. And I know next time I prep, I'm going to probably do that more often, but I don't spend a lot of time in the front of the mirror. I do take my little like gym selfie after I get a pump. But like, I'm not sitting there picking apart my physique. When I get ready, I'm not like sitting there like looking at my abs or lack thereof abs or anything. I'm not like picking apart anything. I don't spend time just like assessing things. And even when I take my check-in photos, like I look at them, but I'm not like, oh, like this, how does this look this week? Like I leave that to my coach. So like, don't spend too much time assessing check-in photos, and don't spend too much time picking yourself apart in the mirror. Just like, yeah, look in the mirror to make sure you don't look like a crazy person when you put your outfit on or have something on inside out or whatever. But like don't spend too much time in front of the mirror. Like there's more things to focus on in the day. And then focus on the positives. So some things that happen when you're in a dieting phase, especially if you push really hard, is your libido is going to take a hit. Your sleep's going to start to suck. Your energy is going to be low. You're going to be starving. You are going to have to pull back on social events, and you're going to get weaker at some point in the gym, most likely. So on the flip side, like once you are out of a deficit and you're at least at maintenance, but also in a growth phase, your libido is going to be higher. That's fun. Better sleep, more energy. You're going to have more food, and you are going to have opportunity to have like more of a social life. I do really encourage, no matter what phase you're in, like not making food the focus of all your social events, but we all know like socially we do focus a lot on food in our culture. So you are going to have more opportunity, like go on date nights or go on vacations and be able to like maybe not track your food for a few days or something, or, you know, do things that aren't as easy to do in a dieting phase. So like, I really like you to focus on those things and just be happy and be present. Like focus on where you're at instead of like being like, oh, I want to be in a dieting phase again, because the grass is always greener. Like when my food has gotten really high, I'm like, oh, I can't wait for my food to be lower. And I honestly, it's so awesome actually thinking about that, because like for so many years, just with my bad relationship with food before, and then just like dieting frequently, like I was always so food focused and so hungry, like where I was like always thinking about the next meal, and like that's the last thing I think about now. I have to like set alarms so I don't miss a meal or whatever. But yeah, it gets a little bit uncomfortable. You do have to eat a little bit more than like you want to sometimes. And I think that's something too, is like when you're eating healthy foods in large amounts, it's a lot more filling than if you're just eating crap. So when those thoughts come though of like, oh, I can't wait to have less food, I think about like 3 or 4 months from now, I'm probably going to be really wishing I had this much food. So just like being present and like focusing on like the gratitude of where you're at, and that you get to be in a growth phase, or you get to be in a dieting phase, or wherever you're at, because it is a choice. Like, we're pretty privileged to be able to decide we want to eat more food and grow muscle, or decide that we want to lose weight, and we can do that because not everyone gets that choice. So I think being present where you're at in whatever phase you're in, and then like those positives of like, I feel great, I can go out and fit food with friends into my plan, or I can go on a date night, or I can take a vacation and not track the whole time, versus when you're in those more strict phases, it's much harder to do that, or those things are going to have like a more negative impact on like your goal at the time. So those are things that I like to focus on there. And I think just like being stronger in the gym and everything is huge, of like, just get excited about being in the gym and hitting PRs and lifting more weight and all those things. So I think that kind of covers the mental side of things. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I've had plenty of bad body image days, but I just throw on a big t-shirt and move on with my day. Like, some days I wear like the cute gym outfits with a sports bra and shorts, and I feel awesome. And then some days I don't feel awesome, and I just throw on like a more baggy outfit and just move on. You know, don't spend that much time thinking about it. We all have those days, and I think if we just think like, oh, poor me, I feel this way today, maybe I should do a mini cut, like just remember, like, you're just feeling that way in this moment, and it's gonna pass. So just like let yourself feel that way. It's normal, but then just like don't let that change your actions, like in like such a like an impulsive way, like of, oh, I'm uncomfortable, like I need to like get out of this phase or whatever, because there will be discomfort, but it's going to be worth it, again, especially if you're doing it the right way. If you have the guidance of a coach who's like not going to let you get fat or whatever, you know, or not going to steer you in the wrong direction, you just have to be like, okay, I trust this person, and I know they're going to like have my best interest at heart, and they want me to reach my goals, they want me to be happy with my physique. That is huge there. So I think that wraps things up. I intend to do like more long videos. I'm going into a prep soon, and I know this is part of why I wanted to make this video, is like I mean, I obviously haven't been vlogging much, or at all. And I think a lot of people tend to do that in their growth phase or their off season. Part of that is because like a prep is just like so exciting. There's so many changes happening very frequently. Like, you can see someone's physique changing all the time. Although I will say, with my own physique, since I got to my healthiest spot and then like really started pushing again with Kevin, like I've seen so many changes in my physique the past like 6 months or so. And I'm not in a prep, but I do think that's why some people hold back from it, is it's just like, it doesn't seem as exciting. It's very monotonous in a growth phase. And that's something to remember too, is it's not always going to be exciting. But I did want to like at least document some of this, and I guess it's kind of too late to do this today, but like maybe do just kind of show what I eat in a growth phase too, because I just know people document like the dieting phases a lot more and not so much on the growth phases. And growth phases are something that should be like celebrated and documented too, because honestly, you probably will spend more time in a maintenance or a growth phase than a diet, or that's what you should be doing. So it should be kind of more normal to like document this part of life as well. So I haven't done a great job with that. But you know, it is what it is. But I am gonna make an effort to do that more. I do need to get a new camera. I record this on my phone, and that's not my favorite way to do it, especially when it dies halfway through my video. And my other camera, just like the record button's not working. So I guess I'm looking for a new camera. If you have any suggestions, let me know in the comments. And if you have any questions about growth phases that I didn't answer, also leave it in the comments, or any other topics you want me to talk about. Happy to do it. And hopefully see you soon.